Good morning, everybody. This morning we're bringing you the last of our webinars for the summer. And this morning we're talking about food innovation. This relies on the development of new food products, processes and services. Primary producers, entrepreneurs, food and beverage companies are all seeking new ways to address the consumer trends, to stay in touch with the consumer and to meet the consumer needs. The development of a short food supply chain or value chains enhances the connection between citizens and producers. We live in times when the long food chains are not sustainable. Long journeys where food has to travel is not either sustainable in terms of the environment or in terms of the consumer's needs, or at least that's what we're told. This morning we have a very excellent panel. Very much involved, head, neck and heels, you could say, in the food situation. Firstly, Aisling Flanagan of Velvet Cloud. And again, that's on the internet, velvetcloud.ie. Aisling is the co-founder and director of Velvet Cloud. The business was set up by Aisling and her husband Michael and produces sheep's milk, yogurt, cheese on their farm just outside Claremorris in County Mayo. Velvet Cloud yogurt is available in over 100 shops around Ireland and appears on the menus of Ireland's best restaurants, including 4 Michelin star restaurants. So Aisling, really delighted to have you because that's quite an achievement.
Thank you very much.
Kathleen Rourke, you're the assistant coordinator on Kishtin, which is a state-of-the-art training and community kitchen offering a range of courses and services of the food and hospitality sector. And certainly training in terms of innovation is extremely important. Kathleen is a professional chef educator with over 20 years of culinary experience. She's worked at various levels from commis to head chef in establishments ranging from 5-star hotels to family-run restaurants. She's trained as a commis chef in the Westbury Hotel, no less, during which time she won a silver medal in the chef medal competition. She's completed all levels 6 and 7 of professional cookery, levels 7 and 8 in international cuisine, and she brings a huge amount of experience and especially knowledge of the training and education area to this morning's discussion. So you're very welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you.
And Eva Milka is, she's a snail farmer, I suppose. Let's start with that. And as you can see on her screen, she's not driving. She's in a car park, I think, in Rathcoole. The joys of technology and how we do our business since COVID started. The farm is run by Eva and Owen Jenkinson, who are pioneering the whole idea of free-range escargot, or the French for snails, in case you're wondering, and research centre, the first of its kind on these shores. Since 2013, they have been researching and farming snails with a particular emphasis on free range and sustainable production. And I think we're going to hear a great deal about sustainable production, not just on snail farming, but also on all of the kind of food innovation services that we're trying to develop in Ireland. So Aisling, I'll start in terms of Velvet Cloud. Even the name Velvet Cloud, where did you get that name and how did the whole idea come about?
So the idea came about when myself and my husband were working and living in Europe. We were out of Ireland for about 10 years, working in the food industry and in IT and in finance. And we would have noticed Michael would have grown up on a traditional farm back here in Mayo. Sheep and dairy farm, so he'd have always had an interest in farming, and we noticed there's an awful lot of sheep's dairy products in Europe on the shelves, and we wondered why, with I think there's over 7 million sheep in Ireland, why people weren't milking sheep and why there wasn't sheep's dairy products. So when we came back to Ireland, we kind of began to look into it, and there was also an interest in dairy alternatives growing at the time, a trend for dairy alternatives. There was a trend for gut health. So the interest in this third brain and your microbiome, and there was a growing industry within the kind of chef community supporting local and artisan products. So all of those trends were quite favourable. So after we did a lot of research, we gave samples out to chefs, and we decided we'd give it a go. There seemed to be a market opportunity. And sorry, I should have said we moved back to Mayo to live in Mayo, and we were looking out at fields full of our sheep and thinking there must be a better way to make money out of these animals. And so that's where it all started. And then to answer your question about the brand Velvet Cloud, my background is in marketing and in branding. So I knew if we're starting a very small artisan business, standout would be really important, because we would be competing in a huge category of international yogurt brands, 70% of which aren't even Irish. So that we'd have to invest time and effort in getting the brand right. So we would have worked with a design and a creative agency and done a lot of research and brought suitcase loads of yogurt pots from all different countries around Europe to sort of research what we would come up with. So we're delighted at the end with the brand, but we had a few funny names on the short list that myself and Michael would have gone with. But when we actually researched it properly, Velvet Cloud is the one that won out. And I'm glad we listened to the research, not to our own ideas. I've lost you there, Seamus. You're on mute, I think.
Even I have to learn how to work the technology, but we might explore more the whole idea of branding, because I think, you know, in Irish terms, Kerry Foods or Kerrygo butter and some other brands have really shot out in Irish terms. And how do we, is that so important? But can I ask you, Eva, you know, tell us, snail farming, you know, the puns are there, plenty of them. Is it a slow building process? Is it a slow building industry, whatever? So talk to me about your particular piece of work and the general industry of snails growth in Ireland.
Well, it is a slow project, no doubt about that. And people in Ireland, they still think that farming snails is an easy euro, that they can become millionaires overnight just because demand is out there. And they also think that farming snails is a matter of throwing them to the field and they look after themselves. Unfortunately, it doesn't work this way. Snail farming can be very profitable and extremely enjoyable, but it's definitely not for everybody, and it is a long-term project. Like, even looking at our cycle, our full cycle takes 10 months. We start with breeding in January, the latest, and we finish with harvest in September. And because snail farming is something very new to Ireland, where there's no expertise available, it's very challenging, because we farm snails using a free range method, which means that we follow their natural cycle as much as we can. We have just one chance per cycle. And if something happens throughout the cycle, in most case scenarios, there's absolutely nothing you can do to fix it, and you have to wait for another cycle to begin. So your really final production will always depend on 4 main factors. It will depend on your knowledge. It's always your number one. It will depend on your infrastructure, so how well your infrastructure is up and running, and is it up and running correctly. It will depend on the weather as well, even though with the global warming, and I shouldn't be saying this, but the global warming is in our favor in Ireland, because we get warmer summers every summer, and the snails are nocturnal animals. They eat at night, and they eat much better when the nights are warmer, so they grow faster. But when you look at the global warming in countries like Italy or Spain, for example, snail farming struggling massively over there due to the massive heat waves they are getting. And by the way, they are 2 out of 3 biggest markets in Europe. So we in Ireland, we are in a perfect a perfect environment. And the final factor, and you may laugh about this, but your success will depend on how you love what you do. Because as you know, in farming, you have to give a bit of heart into it in order to get the good results. So if you were thinking about farming snails just for money and money only, it's definitely not a business for you, because it's just a different type of farming.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we're going to come back to that, because I want to see how many more people in Ireland are doing. Kathleen, on Kishtin, tell us about An Kishtin and how that began and all of that.
So An Kishtin is the brainchild of Castlerea Enterprise Board. They saw the need for providing chef training, how the country is screaming out for chefs. So they had a huge unused building, and they sought planning permission And once that the planning permission sought, then they looked for the funding, and so our Kishna is phase one of a two-phase project. And with our phase one, we run our level 5 professional cookery course. We're developing into evening classes and corporate events and days. And there's a world of possibilities. And then with our phase two, we're developing incubation units for new food producers who want to develop. They have an idea, and we can help them with some marketing and research and a couple of different things. And we work closely with the local enterprise offices, and we have loads of other connections.
So Kathleen, who attends these courses? Is it anybody, everybody, young students? Who attends?
So the ideal group would be, because we're funded by the Galway Roscommon Education Training Board, and we're run as a local training initiative. Ideal would be people from 17 to 35, but we've had students from 17 to 65, you know, and one of our past students has gone on to set up her own business, a vegan dessert company.
Okay, so really it's innovative in the sense that it offers classes to people who really want to improve their skills in this area, have a new idea, etc. Would that be the right? Would that characterize it? It would, yeah.
Oh, definitely, yeah. We're if you're looking to move from your current job and you want to get a foot in the door with catering to see is it for you, well, it's a full-time 48-week course. And after that, you have the skills to manage your own projects should you want to have further education. After being here with the year, we've built in work experience. You know whether the kitchen environment is right for you. It's also perfect for students who want to gain employment, go on to further college and gain employment with a part-time job, you know, because you can do barista training and deli working on weekends, so it can help fund further education.
Good, good. No, that's useful, because we're going to come back to the situation regarding where it was pre-COVID and during COVID, and I suppose that leads me, Aisling, into Velvet Cloud and how you're coping in the current situation. Has it affected you? What does it mean right now for you, Aisling?
Yeah, it affected us dramatically, like a lot of food companies. So 50% of our turnover pre-COVID would have been into the restaurant sector, which we lost literally overnight. We were, you know, orders were coming in on Thursday and they didn't come in on Monday. And for a small business, we're only into our 5th year. That's fairly significant. Cash flow is really important. We also, 2020 was our year for expansion, because we had been selling out year on year of sheep's cheese. But we hadn't been able to raise any funding to expand our vats and to expand our cheese room. And we finally had, unfortunately not in Ireland, we managed to raise some overseas. We had finally got that, and we had a building project to increase the cheese room, which again was all shut down in March, and we weren't allowed to continue, which was an awful shame, because that meant that all the milk that we had, you know, forecast to provide for just had to go to our land. It didn't go down the drain, but it was all, you know, we've lost that season, I suppose, is the simplest way of putting it. So that's the downside. The upside is, because of that, and our backs are against the wall, we decided we'd try to go online and we'd see what would happen. And so we set up overnight an online shop. I'm very fortunate. I have a son who was locked down with us, who's studying computer science, and he's also interested in web development and coding. So he threw up a fairly rudimentary website for us, and we started to sell. And in the first few weeks, it exploded. And what we discovered was a lot of our consumers would be consumers who were who were recovering from an illness, or who have some sort of were in some way vulnerable, and have some sort of maybe digestive related issues. Particularly, they feel they're sensitive to cow dairy. So these customers we would only have been able to serve pre-COVID in Dublin and in the west of Ireland through retail stockists, because we're too small to have a distribution network all around the country. But now they were coming from Donegal to Dingle, and they were delighted that they could buy online, and they were delighted that they could have this product that would be higher in protein and calcium, and that they were now able, and that was sustainable and Irish and all that goes with it, but they were now able to purchase on a weekly basis. So unusual for an e-commerce shop. We have a huge repeat and loyal customer base now. So the same customers are coming back every 3 weeks, which is fantastic. We've learned an awful lot. We've a long way to go. It hasn't replaced our food service sales. A little bit of that has come back now with the restaurants opening. But it's opened a world of opportunities. I think we were talking about that before we came on the Zoom with Eva, and certainly the whole world of online presents us with huge potential.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic in a way, because industries like yours and our others online. And by the way, those of you who have joined in this morning, don't be shy. There, you have an opportunity to ask questions in the Q&A slot. So please give the panel some questions, because they do have the expertise to answer them. So I think in terms of developing online, it's been fantastic. Eva, is it similar for you, or is it a different experience the last few months?
Well, because our main market is a food service market, we literally lost all our customers overnight, which was heartbreaking. But that gave us a time to rethink and put a new roadmap in place. And I can now see a massive opportunity within the end user customer in Ireland and in abroad as well. For us, it's all about educating, especially in Ireland, just to break this psychological barrier we have in order to eat more escargot meat. And not everybody knows that escargot meat is very high in protein, very low in fat, very low in calories. It contains nearly all these amino acids needed for the human body. So it's really an alternative source of protein these days. And this is what we are doing at the moment. We are trying to see and put the strategy in place how we could possibly start educating the end user customer and balance our sales between the retail and the food service. So something like this will happen in the future. Touch the wood. I don't have any wood around me to touch, but touch the wood, it will never happen. We'll have some cash flow.
Eva,
going.
just on the whole, I mean, for many people, as you said, may have thought about snail farming. I think there's 13, if I'm right, snail farmers around Ireland. You did make it very clear that it's for those who are committed. What would you be advising in terms of people who are looking at this as a type of farming? What indeed, going back to the training element, indeed, what sort of training do they need? What sort of capital do they need to get started?
So snail farming, it would be a suitable venture for a farmer who is looking for additional income and looking into farm diversification, or for somebody who has maybe an acre or two, which would be too small for conventional farming, but would be ideal for farming snails. Because the beauty of snail farming is that you don't require much land to produce sufficient amount of snails. You're talking about 10-ton production per acre, where, just to give you an idea, the same acre produces just one cow. So you don't require really much land. We love snail farming, and people love the idea of snail farming because there are no heavy machineries involved, so it would be suitable for a female farmer. It's very sustainable type of farming, so there's no problem with the CO2 emissions like with the conventional farming. There are no antibiotics needed, no vaccines, no fertilizers. So I think there's a future in Ireland, because we need everything to farm snails. We have a suitable climate, we have access to land, we have a good soil, we have a clean water, and we are farming country with an excellent reputation for food. So why not farming snails? But there are so many obstacles to overcome, Seamus.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, just on the obstacle. Well, in terms of, say somebody has an acre or two, as you say, how much money is required? What sort of investment is needed at the beginning?
So the initial investment will depend on three main factors. It will depend on the size of your production. It will depend on the method you're going to start farming snails with, because as you possibly know, you can start farming snails two ways. You can breed your own snails, or you can skip this stage, buy just few baby snails, fatten them up, and look into breeding in the following season. And your initial investment will always depend on your on your premises, so what already you have in place. But if you were starting from the blank field, let's say, without breeding, just buying baby snails to start with, infrastructure wise per acre, you're talking about a minimum, but that's a minimum of 20,000 euros. Plus your initial breeding stock, and our main overhead throughout the cycle is always food.
Okay. No, that's a question that's coming in. I see. Just how would you need to start with, and all of that. Going back to Kathleen, I mean, when you're designing courses, do you talk to people like Eva or Aisling or others in the business as terms of new products, ideas, and just what is the first, I suppose, thing that people get wrong, especially students coming up with what they think is a fantastic idea? What do you say to them?
First of all, like Eva said, you have to have your passion, you know, and with passion you can drive anything. But when we're designing our courses, first of all, we design them to give them the basic skills. If you have the basic skills, you can build on anything. So skills coupled with knowledge and passion, you can have great ideas. And sometimes as food producers, they get very subjective. They think their product is the only way. You know, you have to listen to, like Aisling said earlier, to your market research, and so some people are experts for the reason they've studied all of this. But it's like everything, you have to learn from your failures, you know, and you might hit on some product and it's absolutely fantastic, but then you have to wonder, is there longevity in it? Because there's so many trends involved with food. But at the same time, don't be just jumping onto the next trend. You know, plan for longevity, and be open to new ideas, and travel and listening to other cultures will bring on the next big food trend, you know, because with our Eastern European influences, there's loads of new food that's healthier, and Ireland has moved away from the meat and two veg, and we're open to new ideas.
So, Aisling, in terms of, you sell yogurt, I see, to 100 shops. I presume that's still going ahead, or is that affected as well?
Yeah, no, it's still going ahead, again, because our consumer was well, a lot of them were vulnerable. They would have been cocooning, so that would have dropped. So that's where we would have discovered a lot of them came online to us. And now when I say online, some of the maybe more mature customers would ring us to pay us by credit card. They still aren't comfortable with going online. So yeah, retail was affected a bit. Now, to be fair, in most other situations across retail, they had a very good COVID, for want of a better word. They would have seen increases across all of the supermarket groups. So it's coming back a bit.
Yeah. And again, just give me an idea of, from a marketing perspective, like when you started, how did you reach out to these shops or these retail outlets? How did you actually get a distribution model?
We did a few, well, we rocked up to the back door of every single shop, and we'd come with free samples and a big smile and the trends and the whole, you know, why don't you give it a go? If you're a small food producer, typically the shops work with you on what they call a sale or return basis. So there isn't a lot of risk for the shop, other than they have to reduce space for some other product, but they know that if they don't sell it, they just give it back to you and they don't pay you for it. So that's not obviously a very attractive model for a small food producer, but it does at least enable you to get in the door. So a lot of the well-known specialty shops, like near to us in Galway, like McCambridge's and Morton's, would have been very supportive. And equally, there's shops like that in Dublin, like Cabastons, and again, there's another Morton's in Fallon and Byrne. They would all, and you would know that from being, I suppose, in the food business, they all support local artisan producers. So yeah, to answer your question, into the back door and to try and get them to give you a trial. Then pre-COVID, we would support that launch then with an in-store tasting, because again, our product is very niche and very different. And one of our barriers is people think it's going to taste, well, they call it sheepy, because they remember, a lot of people from rural backgrounds would remember the smell of sheep, and they have this thing in their head, or they've tasted goat, and goat has a particularly strong taste. Whereas actually, ironically, sheep's milk tastes very creamy and very mild, and people are very surprised when they taste it and delighted, thankfully. So we needed to do tastings to overcome that. And then we would have relied, and still do, very heavily on social media and on online promotion.
And do you think, and I'm going to ask Eva this as well in terms of snails, do you think, Aisling, there is an inherent barrier within the consumer side of things, that they look at sheep and they don't think milk, they don't think there's, even though we say we're moving from, I think Kathleen said, the two meat and veg, but are we very traditional in our thinking still? And how does that?
I suppose we are, and there's certain cohorts that would be very traditional. Certainly the internationalization of Ireland has been hugely helpful, because so many new tastes and culinary aspects have been brought into Ireland. So no, we're definitely moving in the right direction. Again, I suppose for our niche, some of whom would be mature, they might be more conservative. But certainly our younger customers are very willing to try, and in fact actually really interested in gut health and products like kefir and alternative dairy, and very much into sustainability, which again is an advantage for us, because again, our customer, we compete maybe with plant-based alternatives like soya milk and almond milk, but they're all flown thousands of miles across the sea to get to Ireland. So again, the millennium type and the Gen Z customer is much more interested in provenance and sustainability. So that'll hopefully play into our favor as well.
And Eva, your sales, 95%, I think, go export, probably France, and I think. Is there any possibility of developing some more in the Irish market, or is that too difficult because it's seen as snails and that's not usually eaten in Ireland?
Well, we keep trying anyway. What I find in Ireland is that we have this psychological barrier in order to eat escargot meat. So for us, Ireland is all about educating. We travel a lot to...
Okay, have you frozen there? We're going to hold for a second.
Okay.
We'll just see that we come back, but I do want to follow that in a moment. I mean, again, Kathleen, I suppose in terms of education, is it how do have we got a good education system, or do we, do young people thinking of food, are they encouraged to get into it enough, in terms of making a career? What's your advice there?
I think we're very fortunate that we have a fantastic education system in Ireland, and it's very accessible. If we were to compare what we're doing, if my students do my course as a private college or whatever, it could cost them maybe 5,000. They can come here and do it for free. If we were to do this in America, you would be left with student debt of 30,000. However, there are barriers. People have a perception that it's a lot of Gordon Ramsays shouting and roaring in the kitchen. That day is gone, because people won't tolerate that. And then lots of people don't like the standing on their feet for so long, and it's backbreaking. But it's like that. It's a passion. You'll either love it or hate it. But more needs to be done at second level. Home economics needs to be nearly compulsory for all, because it's a valuable life skill. Food is one thing we have to do every day of the week. We have to eat every day, and why not get the education that you can feed yourself better and make healthier and more informed choices and have better options. And like that, you would come around to eating snails, because they are a great source of protein,
And Eva, I think you're back now. I hope you're back anyway.
Yeah, I'm back.
Good, good. But going back to snails and going back to what Kathleen is saying in terms of breaking down barriers and getting people more into it, from a branding perspective, do you think that maybe we should brand your particular food differently or better? And how do we break down those barriers in Ireland?
No, well, our marketing strategy should be really designed around the nutritional values. And I'll be very honest with you guys, we've never actually considered marketing our escargot meat as a high protein product until Chef Richard Corrigan cooked our snails for Irish rugby players. So what Richard Corrigan thinks in general is that all sports people, not only Irish rugby players, they are sick of eating chicken. So he was trying to introduce alternative foods to chicken, and the snail meat is an amazing example. For us in Ireland, the biggest challenge is always to encourage somebody to taste them for the first time. But once you taste them, once this barrier is broken, I mean, the feedback we are getting is phenomenal. It's just, it is psychological, really and truly.
And,
So,
and I'm just thinking of placing snails or escargot on the shelves of our supermarkets or in our restaurants. Do you find that that they themselves, those are the retailers or the wholesalers even, are they not convinced, or why is it we just can't get them onto the shelves?
well, Seamus, we don't have any presence in retail yet. We are just putting a new roadmap in place in order to investigate this further. But I remember we went to there was City West last year, a food event where we did, our regular tasting, and we had a bit of fun cooking snails and giving them away as a samples. Every second person we were talking to, they were asking about a retail version of what we sell to the food service. So I think there's an interest. Will this work? It may not, but it's definitely worth to try and build the customer base here in Ireland.
And it's 13 snail farmers in Ireland, is that correct?
We work with 13 snail farms, Seamus, ourselves, but I believe there are more farms than 13 these days.
And is there maybe if they came together as a network, would that help? And would that actually improve? And should there be some support maybe from the Department of Food, Agriculture for that? Or have you thought about any kind of support like that?
Absolutely, Seamus. This is the overall objective, to create a centralized marketing center in Ireland in the future. Unfortunately, snail farming is not recognized in Ireland yet, so we don't get any support on research and development side. This is why, even if you look at our farm, it's not just a snail farm, it is a research and development, and every year we try to do different things to improve our system, to reduce the mortality rate, to reduce the labor cost, but it's all work in progress. Like, we started farming snails back in 2013. Our biggest disadvantage was the fact that we were first in Ireland to farm snails, so we were guinea pigs. It was nobody to learn from. It was trial and error, but now everything is becoming easier. So having a strong network in place would be just ideal. And I love working together and I love collaborating together, because I believe this is the only way to build this industry in Ireland and to make it to be successful and sustainable. But we are not there yet. It's such a young industry, like 8
Indeed.
years, it's so little.
And I see, thankfully, you're beginning to come in with the questions. I see Paul Smith is asking you, Eva, could you dehydrate the snails and sell them as protein powder? Now, that's an idea. Maybe you haven't even thought about it. But anyway, Paul, thank you for that question. Eva, are you thinking about that by any chance? No?
Well, believe it or not, there's a guy in County Kilkenny. He's researching this opportunity. Is one of them. He's looking into dehydrating snail meat and make them into a protein powder. He's also looking into crushing shells, because shell is built out of calcium. It's a pure calcium. Putting the calcium in this powder into a capsules for the human consumption. So like a human, what would you call it? Supplement, like a calcium supplement. So there's a massive potential. Yeah, it's protein. Paul, so if you're looking into this, I'll support you as much as I can, because it's an amazing market opportunity.
Aisling, I see Sarah Burke has lots of questions about, I suppose, funding. And have you got funding from anywhere like Leader or department or wherever?
Yeah, I see
How
some
does
of
that
those. I see some of those questions, Seamus, and I suppose people are saying, is it really difficult to access support? I'd say the answer to that is yes and no. We have had an excellent experience with our local enterprise office. We've availed of a startup grant when we started way back 5 years ago. We have availed of, during COVID, a trading online voucher, which helped us to get online and is helping us as I speak at the moment. We have been very fortunate with Board BIA, because they have been a great support, particularly in terms of information and new market insights, that kind of thing. What has not been easy, and is still not easy, despite us showing that there's demand for our product and despite us selling out of cheese every year, is access to working capital. Banks are not lending to small businesses. I suppose banks and governments say they're lending to small business, but their definition of small business could be a business with 250 employees and several million turnover. They're not lending to micro businesses. So as I said, we could not secure funding. We eventually did get some overseas, but that was through our own business and personal network. We have been unable to get it yet from any financial institution here. So there's been positive and negative experiences. But I would also just say that you need to also, if you're going to avail of state support from any of the agencies, they can't fund and back and support every idea. They have to try and back the winners, because they don't have an unlimited budget. So if you're going for that kind of support, know what the opportunity is. Have tried to done as much research as you can and gathered as many figures as you can to support that idea, to show them that it's not just a concept you've picked up out of the air. And then I'd find them very, very supportive. And even if maybe you're struggling with that and justifying that, they have a panel of mentors who'll help you to walk through that concept and see if there's an opportunity and see what you need to do to find out if there's an opportunity.
So your local enterprise office is a good place to start.
Absolutely.
And maybe see where you can go then. Kathleen, would you concur with that? How is, what way would you advise people getting into the business in terms of funding?
In terms of funding, yeah, definitely with the local enterprise office, we've had a few new business startups and the start your own business. The Roscommon local enterprise office here in town, they offer a start your own food business, and Ona, that does some of the courses in there, she's fantastic, shows you pitfalls and positives and negatives, and sometimes she makes you take off the rose tinted glasses, which sometimes you need, but they're a font of knowledge, and they will help and support. And like Ashley said, there are funding and supports available. And then like that, within Europe, there are other supports available, but it's about finding them. You nearly need someone to work on funding all the time. It's a minefield. It
is a minefield, and I see Chris Hughes is talking about community banking, something we don't have in Ireland, and Irish Rural Link have been campaigning for that type of banking, which is available across the European, which allows the kind of innovation that you're promoting to be funded properly. And it is a major sin against the banks, I have to say, since the last recession, and now we're into another one. We've never reformed the banking system. But anyway, I'm only getting on a hobby horse as far as Irish Rural Link is concerned. But it does go on me that really we still haven't fixed the banks to any great degree. Just staying with you, Kathleen, and is there, from your perspective, as I said, you're designing these courses, You know, is there enough support in terms of the industry coming to you and saying, would you, you know, design courses that we would want people to join us in, whether it's in the food creation, in other words, research and development, or whether it's in the preparation of food, or whether it's in the marketing? Are you happy with the industry itself in that it's supporting you developing these courses?
There's not much feedback from industry because, and I know it sounds very negative, but the industry is so concerned with the customer that's front facing them. You know, the industry needs to start helping themselves. They're crying out for chefs all the time, but yet when they get a young person into the industry, they don't want to invest in training. They don't want to take the time, and sometimes that investment doesn't have to be like a financial thing. It might be just the ability to release them to attend college on a one-day a week. I did most of my training on a part-time one-day-a-week basis, and I had to pay for all my own college. It was a huge difficulty to access the guaranteed one-day-a-week off. I don't think that's a huge thing to ask. But the industry needs to be more proactive in telling the educators what they're looking for. You know, at the moment we're in a bit of reform. We're rewriting modules and stuff because they have been a good bit outdated, to be honest. So my attitude has been they're not suitable for industry. So yeah, fine, everything is based in the classics. However, now we're teaching our students how to modernize them, make them more industry friendly. Because I tell them every day, your ability to keep your job as a chef is your ability to make money for your employer. Yeah. If you're not making money, you're not going to have a job.
Yeah, I think again, I think you raise a good point, because again, I think the food industry, particularly the hospitality industry, which accounts for a large number of jobs in this country, probably does need to strengthen up its means and ways of actually encouraging research and development, and that includes education development, because I think the future is in better skilled young people and anybody involved in the industry. I really do think that's the case. Eva, in terms of the market, again, we got kind of caught out in the last time I asked this question, but okay, the snail market is mainly French, I think, and this is me just guessing. And who are the competitors for you? And is Ireland at a disadvantage that it has to export so much?
Well, the three biggest markets in Europe are French, Italian, and Spanish. If you look at outside Europe, the second biggest market is US market, the third biggest market is Japanese market, and the fourth biggest market is Canadian market. Like, our biggest disadvantage in Ireland is that Ireland as a country doesn't produce enough snails to grab all these opportunities out there. Because even if you're looking to, I don't know, link up with the US market, the first question they're going to ask you is how much you can produce. It's a massive market, and we've learned very quickly that all these biggest markets, they are not for us. We are just too small. So we have to look into outside this bracket, and we decided to go after Middle East market, Dubai and Singapore to be more specific. These markets are tiny markets which suit us perfectly, and these markets are offering or paying premium prices for premium Irish products. And I was extremely surprised. I didn't realize actually that the food service in Dubai and Singapore, they are already importing so many Irish products. You're talking about Irish cheese, Irish butter, Irish oysters, and they want something premium. They want something different, and for us, this is the best market to go after. So it's all about scaling up, really. But people start farming snails and they are failing. There's so much still to be done on the research and development side to scale the production in Ireland in the future. So this is our biggest obstacle.
Eva, where do you go for advice? Is it to your network, or is it the Teagasc, or where do you go for advice if you want to start snail farming?
I don't. We do trial and error. It's trial and error every year. It's lots of research and development happening. All actually research and development happening on our farm. Unfortunately, we can't learn from experience from other countries, because if you look at, for example, snail farming in France or Italy, they have over 40 years of experience farming snails over there. We have 7.5. Like this season's our 8th season, but we failed on 3 different farming techniques before we developed our own to suit the Irish weather conditions. So it is difficult because we are trying to develop something from scratch.
And if somebody, if a young person or a farmer listening in here this morning was saying, I must explore that idea of an acre there or 2 acres that I could use, what would they do? Where would they go to start?
Well, they can give us an initial shout. I love talking to people over the phone because that always gives me an understanding what this person idea is about farming snails. Because as I said, snail farming is not for everybody, and then we can start working from there. But
Okay.
it is definitely a long-term project.
Okay, okay. I suppose, and Aisling, your Velvet Cloud, it's, you know, into this discussion about short food chains, long food chains, sustainability, all of that. Where's your market? Is it in the West, or is it in Dublin, or is it, or do you export at all?
Oh no, our market is nationwide. And also we were, again, pre-COVID, we were exporting, and certainly to make it a sustainable, growing, viable business, we will need to. I mean, there's only 4 million people on the island of Ireland. So that's not going to sustain very many people in sort of a niche premium high-end product like ours, or sorry, it's not going to sustain a business like ours. So yes, our next sort of targets, a lot of interest coming from Asia and Germany. But again, like everything else, we keep running out of cheese. So until we can kind of get our expansion plans up and running, that's a challenge. We would have enough for yogurt. And again, we're looking to export as soon as COVID conditions make that possible.
And if you don't mind me asking, Aisling, in terms of investment, again, somebody with a sheep enterprise thinking of maybe, could I change it or convert it? I presume it's a big investment to just change over.
We would get a lot of phone calls from farmers considering changing from maybe traditional sheep farming to sheep dairy farming, but they I suppose they're only considering it if there's a ready market for them. So they'd often be ringing us and saying, would you take the milk from us? I suppose advice to farmers, if they're looking at changing into dairy, they would need to have a market. They would need to create a market for themselves. There isn't a ready-made market like there is even for goat milk. There's at least, you know, Glenisc are buying goat milk for their products. So no, it's not a viable option unless you have a market for yourself. And then if you want to go into making sheep's dairy product, your capital investment then involves whatever you need for a food production unit, for vats and for presses. If you're making cheese or yogurt, it would depend. So it would be quite significant, yeah, because you're going to need, regardless of what dairy product you go into, you're going to need all of the stainless steel kit and food grade kit, plus you're going to have to operate out of a food grade unit. And while there are plans and discussions, and there are some great food hubs around the country, certainly in the west of Ireland, we never got anywhere with that. And there's talks about developments in the west, and they're there now. But
and I take it the fact that you diversified into yogurts and other, that was basically an attempt to make sure that the milk could be used in different ways, so that you weren't completely dependent on just the milk itself being sold.
Oh yeah, we would not have, we'd have a tiny market for the actual milk, because shelf life on milk is very short. It's only 10 days. So that means you'd have to get your product from here, packed out and onto the shelf of the supermarket and sold. And that just is not feasible for sheep's milk within a 10-day period. It's just commercially not viable. It doesn't work.
Quick question coming in on my text is, A simple question, I suppose. Is sheep milk more medically better for you than dairy milk, or can you
Yes,
answer
well,
that?
no, well, you have to be very careful with the EU regulations how you answer that. But factually, sheep milk has more nutrients than cow's milk. It is a higher solid content. It has a higher, I'm going to get a bit technical here, but a lot of people ask us about cholesterol, and we're working with the University of Limerick on a project to sort of be able to prove and say it on the label. But it has a higher concentration of what we call polar lipids. So these are the good fats. These are the guys that go around and they don't cling to your arteries. So again, hopefully long term we'll be able to make that claim, but we can't legally do that now. It is easier to digest because the molecules are smaller in sheep's milk, and also it has A2 protein rather than A1. A1 is the thing that makes people's guts, if you like, react. The best analogy somebody gave me, and I use all the time, is if you think about the size of a calf when it's born and the size of a lamb when it's born. A lamb is what, about 3 or 4 kilos, depending on the breed of sheep. So the milk that's made for baby sheep is very much similar in terms of properties to the milk that's made for baby humans, because they're roughly about 3 or 4 kilos when they're born. Whereas a calf, what is it? I don't know. I'm not a great on cow dairy farming, but is it 40 kilos, 30 or 40 kilos?
Yeah.
And the milk is made for an animal, a calf, which has to grow to whatever 250 kilos in 2 years. So totally different, which is why it's not as suited to the human gut as sheep's milk is. So yes,
Okay.
I suppose is a long way of answering that question.
Okay, all the dairy people can write in and tell us, you know, why that's all wrong and why their milk is superior, etc. So we can get that debate going. In your kitchen, Kathleen, you know, are there discussions all the time about what type of food is suited to the Irish palate? And if you were trying to judge, you said a few minutes ago that we're moving away from the meat and veg. You know, how exotic have we become, and is our tastes improving or disimproving?
Our tastes have improved an awful lot. We've diversified, we're willing to try new things, willing to grow new things. The older generation, recently as part of COVID, we did the Meals on Wheels project. We had to go back to meat and 2 veg. Of our 100 meals a day, we had 1 vegetarian. And then we had 2 people that ate chicken every day. They wanted chicken only. From past students on our course like that, we've had students that were totally vegan only, and I would have to adapt recipes to suit them, to try to cook the traditional thing, but as a vegan only. And that's a challenge in itself. But it's doable. At the moment with our students, we're doing menu planning and applied nutrition. And we're looking at all the different sources of food and provenance of food, and we're investigating local food producers, and they never realize, and it's all linked in with education. They go to the supermarket, they go everywhere, and they just take the food off the shelf, and there's no thought in it. We grow our own vegetables here. They saw how in 10 or 12 weeks, we have some food ready to go. In the next 3 weeks, we'll have the world of tomatoes. We'll be puking tomatoes. But the younger generation, the more modern, they're more adventurous, more willing to try.
Eva, do you think our palates, I mean, if you're in France and you ordered escargot, I'm sure there'd be a whole range of ways in which you would be presented with the dish. Is our appetites, or our tastes, I should say, changing? And does that help your industry?
Well, absolutely. And the chefs in Ireland are much, much, much more creative than chefs in France. Some of the chefs in Ireland could create such an amazing and unique dishes using escargot meat, where when you go to France and you ask for escargot dish, in most case scenarios, you will get them all swimming in garlic butter. So yes, and people in Ireland, they are more open when it comes to experience new foods. They travel much more than they used to. Yeah, so definitely yes. But for us and our product, it's still a work in progress.
And Eva, I don't know. Oh, you're gone. I hope you're. Are you still there? You
Yeah,
are.
yeah.
Eva, here's a question coming in here. Can I get escargot in restaurants in Ireland? And if I was ordering it, is there any particular dish I should order? Somebody is being brave this morning.
Well, the Legal Eagle, the restaurant in Dublin, they created this beautiful dish. It's their signature dish. So they serve escargot with bone marrow.
Wow.
Absolutely
Oh, very good.
gorgeous, just outstanding dish. Some of the chefs they would serve them tempura deep fried, like in the butter, like if
Yes.
our fish and chips dish. So the escargot meat, this actually particular dish is very crispy on the outside and very meaty on the inside. Beautiful. Some of the chefs would use escargot meat in vol au. So instead of chicken, they would use escargot meat. But even ourselves, I remember, well, we still eat escargot at home, not as often as we used to, I must confess. But we used to add them in scrambled egg in the morning for the higher protein count. You can make an omelet.
Okay. Okay. I've lost you again. And so I'm just going to Aisling. Um, are the tastes improving? Do you think? Would you have a view on tastes in Ireland? Are they improving, and are we getting more exotic, or how do you see it?
Yeah, absolutely. As I say, with the internationalization of Ireland and so many people from so many nationalities living here, that helps. Our chefs, I totally agree with Eva, they're far more adventurous than some of the French and Italian chefs who would traditionally been viewed as, you know, the best chefs in the world. Our guys and girls are just incredible with what they create, and therefore we're all being exposed to much wider tastes. And then just general market trends and general, as I keep coming back to this whole area of gut health and the importance of this third brain, and people are paying a lot while we have an obesity crisis. Then on the other side of the spectrum, we have a huge interest therefore in health and wellness and what can we eat to improve our health and our wellness. So that exposes us to more and wider and different tasting products. So yeah, I think that.
And I presume
definitely.
when you were developing yogurts, what way did you establish a testing, or did you test it out among different age groups? How do you manage that?
Yeah, well, what we actually, and again, this just shows the importance of research. We thought when we started off, because our research would have pointed to a demand in the food service sector primarily, that would be our biggest and most important market. So what we did is we made prototype yogurts in our kitchen, and we passed out samples to chefs around Ireland. And I remember people like Neville Maguire and the Sheridans and John McKenna, you know, getting in touch and encouraging us and being really supportive and saying, go with it, you have an amazing and a fantastic product. And we actually didn't do as much research among the consumer market because we thought we were too soon. We thought we were sort of 10 or 20 years behind goat's milk, that people just wouldn't accept it here in Ireland. And we were wrong, and thankfully. So actually we developed this whole consumer market of, as I say, healthy eaters who are interested in their gut, who might have eczema or sinuses as a result of eating dairy. And I don't, by the way, just come back to that I'm not in any way swiping at the cow dairy farmers, because the one advantage they have, and they will remain with them for years to come, is that they are much cheaper than sheep's milk. Sheep's milk is a premium product. You only get 2 liters of milk out of a good ewe, whereas you get 18 out of a cow. So it's we're going after a totally different market. We're not competing as such. It's a niche, more of a health sort of market, and we never will be able to totally different animal, totally different volumes.
Well, time is flying. I'm going to go around everybody with a last question, and I'm going to start with you, Kathleen. I know it's a difficult time to be asking this question, but bearing in mind the situation we're in, what sort of plans have you for An Kishtin or your team with you have into the future, into the medium and long-term future?
So we've lots of plans actually. With our students and our level 5, to future-proof it, we have built into our modules that there'll be more of a blending element, a blended learning element within it. But then we are looking
blended
at
learning is blended learning.
So that it's online and in classroom. We did blended learning. We did online learning, and we would send out packs in the post to our students. However, a lot of that is to get buy-in from the start. Unfortunately, this year's students, they weren't told at the start this could happen because we couldn't predict it. I have no crystal ball. But for future-proofing it, that's been done at the start, you know, that we can have days where you can work on your products at home. We, for centre development, we're looking at doing more evening classes. We have a fine facility here, and it's generally been used in the morning from like 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock, and then it's shut up for the evening. So we want to look at getting more chefs in and doing evening classes and stuff like that, and even stuff on the weekends. At the moment, we have an artisan baker here, and he comes in at night time 2 or 3 days a week, and he sells his products locally. And then from the overall centre work, you know, the phase 2 hopefully should be starting by October roughly, and then in the next year then hopefully working with new food innovators and helping them get their kitchens up and running and get their products towards the market and stuff like that, and basically doing whatever helps. We're here, we answer any questions, we don't claim to know everything, but if we can put you in touch with the right person, we're here, we're very amenable.
Well, I think you do a fantastic job in Ankishton, and those of you who have joined us this morning, if you know of friends or if you want to find out more, please go to Kathleen's website and find out more, because I think this is a good place to start. We haven't got Eva still, but I suppose, Aisling, in these times, talking about future plans must be a little bit of a mix and match. So what's your immediate plans in terms of Velvet Cloud?
Yeah, well, yes, it is challenging, but our immediate plans is to increase our online offering. We hope by the weekend to launch a limited amount of our sheep's cheese online. Export is obviously on the cards for us and was supposed to be part of our 2020 plans. That'll be 21. So we're now, you know, we're in the middle, if you like, of that expansion phase. It's just unfortunate that we've lost out on the peak milk season to exploit that. So yeah, I suppose it's really nearly a postponement of 2020 and moving all our plans into 21.
Well, that's pretty good. Unfortunately, Eva is not with us, so technology can do that nowadays, as you know. So look, we're coming to the end of this webinar this morning. I think food innovation in Ireland is a way forward. As I think Kathleen said, we all use food every day. We need it, we eat it. And therefore, what's so wrong about making a living and creating some jobs as a result? I think what we've seen this morning is a really passionate trio of guests who really brought to us that passion, but also brought some know-how in terms of how to get started and some really good advice. And clearly, government, if you're listening, I think we do need to look at the cash flow situation. We do need to look at the way we fund very small enterprises. And as Aisling said, you know, small enterprises are a lot smaller than a couple of hundred people. That's not a small enterprise and shouldn't be seen as one. So I think we have a lot to do. So Aisling, may I thank you sincerely for joining us this morning, and good luck with Velvet Cloud. Kathleen Rourke of Ankishton, thank you for being with us. And again, may I wish Ankishton the best of success in the next phase of your development. Folks, for joining us this morning, thank you as well. Thank you for your questions, and we will do our best to make sure they're answered. This can be seen on the YouTube channel later on in the week. So to you who joined us this morning, thanks. If you want to join Irish Lure Link, we keep saying please do. And goodbye and good morning.